With the update from Scott, which reads that he was happy with the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 4, and that the Halloween DLC will be something different entirely, not adding to the story, or being a prequel/sequel, it is fairly safe to assume that we now have all the available information required for the timeline and composing a complete story. Although please remember that not all the information is included by design from Scott, so part of the story is left to your imagination to fill in these gaps. This is a classical style of horror storytelling, which is often referred to as the Alfred Hitchcock effect. With that in mind, let's begin with the timeline for the most recent game, Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Currently, in my mind, there are two competing timeline theories for placing the game. In general, the most popular theory is that these events relive the 5 days before the bite of 87. But there is also the less popular theory of a bite of 83 timeline. Well, there is evidence for both, but which is it? Let's begin with 1987. Reverse chronological order has always been a favorite storytelling method of mine, something I seem to share with the games themselves. To understand the timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's, we first need to understand the bite. The bite is first mentioned in the very first phone message we hear from the mysterious mentor, casually referred to as the phone guy.
Hello. I wanted to record a message for you to help you get settled in on your first night. So just be aware, the characters do tend to wander a bit. They're left in some kind of free roaming mode at night. Something about their servos locking up if they get turned off for too long. They used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah. It's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know? Now, concerning your safety, the only real risk to you as a night watcher...
From here, we'll skip back in time to Five Nights at Freddy's 2. The date on the check we receive after the last night Jeremy works shows us that this game and its location are in the past, in 1987. Once again, a friendly phone guy mentors our new employee to the Fazbear family and helps him along in his new night role, until he is moved to the day shift for one last birthday party.
Hello. What on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right. Listen, just finish your shift. It's safer than trying to leave in the middle of the night. We have one more event scheduled for tomorrow, a birthday. You'll be on day shift. Wear your uniform. Stay close to the animatronics and make sure they don't hurt anyone, okay?
After the events of this, the location is shut down, after only a few weeks in operation, to which the management states that they plan to reopen in a smaller location with a smaller budget. This is a reference to the location you'll play in Five Nights at Freddy's 1. In accordance with the 1987 timeline theory, we are now at the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 4, which take place in the same week, or just slightly before Jeremy starts his night vigil in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 itself takes place in two different times, the events of the gameplay in which you are both in the spectral bedroom and the minigames. Chronologically, the minigames happen first, and the bedroom takes place after. In the minigames, we learn the tragic tale of a younger brother, terrified to tears of his surroundings and tormented by his older brother and bully friends. In a series of tragic events, which should have been his birthday party, one of the happiest days in a child's life, turns to his demise, as the brother and bully lift him up, only with the intention to scare him into the jaws of the waiting Fredbear. The mechanism snaps shut, perhaps weakened by the tears, as we know that Springlock models are weakened by moisture, and crushes this innocent birthday boy's head. This was the moment myself and many others saw the obvious conclusion that this was the legendary bite of 87. It was so obvious just by looking at it. All the pieces clicked into place like a rusty springlock. As an interesting nod to this theory, you can enter 1987 into Five Nights at Freddy's 1, and you see this screen. Yes, everything was in place, except this happened. These short seconds of a cartoon clip featuring Freddy and his friends has caused quite the headache for theorists and fans of the Fazbear franchise. If this one clip wasn't included, we could have wrapped it all up, gone home with a nice neat story, all presents wrapped and ribbons tied up. But it does exist, and it was the thread that unraveled the sweater. After seeing this, clues started to appear in my mind, one after another, over and over, and I am now convinced that there is much more to this story than meets the eyes. Prior to the release of the game, there was quite a bit of teasing from our friend Scott, showing 8s, 7s and 3s in the teasers, hiding them in source code of his website for obsessive people such as myself to find and rack our confused minds over. If there was another bite, then why haven't we heard of it before? Why include 2 bites at all? But there is evidence, quite strong in fact, that this could not be the bite of 87. We have to remember that very first phone call from the first night in the first game.
So just be aware, the characters do tend to wander a bit. They're left in some kind of free roaming mode at night. Something about their servos locking up if they get turned off for too long. They used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah. It's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know? Now concerning your safety, the only real risk to you as a night watchman here.
The suits used to walk around during the day, and it's amazing that the body can live without the frontal lobe. Now let's look back to the mini-games. In Five Nights at Freddy's 4, we see multiple employees, and even the purple guy, helping them into suits. But we don't see any of them walking. Only the employees are roaming. And even in the tragic event, we see something interesting. The bite takes place while Freddy is stationary on stage, the bullies mercilessly lifting him into the jaws of death. Why would the suits have their walking mode disabled if the bite occurred in a stationary animatronic? Even look at the location. We see Fredbear and Spring Bonnie dancing on stage, but we don't see any of the animatronic toy models that are featured so prominently in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, a game which we know for certain was in 1987. There does seem to be some references to the toy models. We have the small girl with her collection, and the torn mangle in the child's house. But these are just plushie toys, and none of the toy animatronics are featured in the game or inside the location. This speaks volumes, as the toy models were top of the line, new and improved models that wouldn't be hidden off stage. Now let's look to another tragic clue in the phone guy's words.
It's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know?
The keyword, live. After the minigames in the timeline, the actual gameplay occurs. In a new direction in the game we play as a scared child, crying in his bedroom, scared of the dark and monsters in the closet and on the bed. By looking carefully during the nights, 3 important clues are revealed: the flowers, the pills, and the IV, clearly showing that this child is in the hospital, likely in a coma from this crunch of 83. The game itself was teased with the words nightmare. This game is the nightmare. The nightmare of a child suffering from bullying, a terrible accident and trauma to the head. But sadly, all nightmares come to an end. In the last minigame, we see a heart-wrenching moment in which the crying child sees his friends disappearing slowly, followed by the last toy using the same text color as the brother he says goodbye. And if you can listen carefully, you can hear the sound of an EKG fading, flatlining, and signaling the death of an innocent. The last antagonist we see on the final story mode night, Nightmare Mode, is also named Nightmare. He is the representation of the events this child suffers. After you beat the nightmare, the night ends, and he slips into death. This was a very emotional and beautifully sad end to the game. But how does this crunch of 83 relate to the bite of 87? How do we tie these 2 events together? The minigames happen over 5 days, then the nightmare occurs. For the child, over an unknown amount of time. Perhaps the nightmare only lasts a few days, but it could also have lasted 4 years, until the child's death. If the child's death from the coma ended in 1987, the puppet could have taken his soul into the Golden Fredbear, this triggering the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 2.
Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right.
In this phone call, we hear something interesting. Someone used a suit, a yellow one. Now none of them are acting right. We always assumed that this meant that the purple man had started murdering again. But what if no one used a suit during Five Nights at Freddy's 2? It was moving because the spirit had been released from its body and was now restless. This also triggering the spirits in the Fazbear 4 to also awaken. A common theme in stories about restless spirits, they often inflict their own fate on others. A woman who drowns to death will lead people to their own watery graves, or a victim of a car crash will influence the drivers to crash their own. This is the only way that the spirits can deal with their death, re-inflicting their fates on others to be closer to life, even for an instant. And this brings us to the last conclusion, that the bite of 87 occurred to another, not our crying child, but another unknown innocent. This tragic and twisted turn of fate closes our story and the timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's 4. However, there are still unanswered questions for the franchise. What will be in the chest when the locks come off in the upcoming DLC? What did the child see in the first minigames of Five Nights at Freddy's 4? You remember, he said, "What did you see? You know what will happen if they catch you." Who are the Shadow Bonnie and Freddy's? And what is the final fate of Springtrap? Did you forget him? I hope not, because he did survive the fire, and he didn't forget you. These questions will be examined and some of them answered in a future video when our paths meet again. Hey guys, thanks for watching that, and I hope you enjoyed these theories. If you did like this, remember to leave a like and maybe share it to see if we can get this around. It'd be nice. Also, why not check out some of my other videos? They're pretty okay. You know, they're alright. Also, a word from my what's that? We don't have a sponsor? Oh, I guess, I don't know, you can follow me on Twitter or something. Anyway, have a good day, and play safe.